Hello there, fellow truth seekers. This is Doug coming to you once again on this here Shabbat. I hope all of you are well and that you have been blessed. I wanted to kind of have a few things I wanted to just mention beforehand. One, I hope that y'all, that the yogurt video was helpful. I tried to make it as simple and easy as I could. And I hope you have success if you're attempting it. Somebody said they were on their second batch or whatever, and they had a yogurt maker. I ordered a yogurt maker, and the people, after about a week, they messaged me on eBay and said they canceled it. Now, I think they were one of these people that do retail arbitrage or whatever. They don't really have anything. They just they're buying it somewhere else or whatever. And maybe they couldn't get them or something. I don't know, but I didn't never get one. And that's why, I remembered I had that Instapot and I decided I'd try it, and see if, how that worked out. And it worked out, so far it's worked out pretty good for me. But the other thing was the video that I made that was what about censorship? And I even said in there that they would strike me on that and take that video down. And it had like 2 views and it was down. And I appealed it and they restored it. First time ever that I have appealed them giving me a strike and taking my video down that I ever got the video put back up. Because if you look, again, because I guess maybe a real human being reviewed it or something, because normally, it goes through one of these AI algorithms or something, and it just, I got a response back pretty quick, which was really amazing, because the last one that I got struck on and they took down, it didn't get put back up, and I never heard nothing from my appeal. And because I just called it out for what it is. Censorship and all, and the right that we have as human beings to have an opinion. We got a right to have an opinion. And I like to think that I look at it from a biblical worldview, and to try to have an opinion that is based on truth and that follows the truth of Scripture. Not that I'm always 100% right about everything. I know that. I'm a human being just like anybody else. I like these lights, these ring lights or whatever, but, because they make you look normal or whatever, natural. But, man, that white light, it's rough on the eyes. But anyway, that's, I just wanted to kind of mention that, because I even said in the video they'd probably take it down. And they certainly did. It didn't get 2 views, and it was, and that was quick. Before, sometimes they'd get like 20 views or something, and then it would get tucked down or whatever. But this time, they're getting them AI algorithms to where they're Johnny on the spot now with their censorship. But today, one of the things I want to talk about is what it means to be walking in the ways of Elohim. Okay. The fact of the matter is and I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I think that the Ruach is bringing it to my mind to ponder on it, meditate on it, and that is, what does it really mean? And in light of the world, the so-called Protestant, Christian, and Catholic or whatever, just Christianity in general, what does it mean in light of that? And I think, and it's just my opinion, again, you don't have to believe what I tell you. I don't want you to. I want you to do your own, your own studies and come to your own conclusions and rely upon the Ruach to lead you to the truth. Not Doug, not, some preacher or something somewhere, but let the Ruach lead you to truth. Okay, because when Yahushua was, right before his ascension, he says, I must go so that he, the Ruach HaKodesh, may come, for he will lead you to all truth. Okay, so he's going to lead you to the truth, not me. He might lead you to me, to, if there's something that I'm, a message that I'm giving, or, a study or whatever I'm doing that might benefit you in some way, or it might lead you to go and look into it more, then, he can do that. But I want you to, be good Bereans. You receive what I have to say with an open mind. Don't just discount it right off. Listen to what I have to say, meditate on it, think about it, and then you look through the scriptures to see whether what I'm telling you is so or not. Okay? And the scripture, especially in the Tanakh, or what we call the Old Testament, lays it out and goes over it over and over and over again about walking in the ways of Yahuwah Elohim. And what are them ways? Well, I can tell you. Paul tells us in Galatians, and I'm going to read from Galatians, what these attributes of Elohim is. I forgot to mark my spot. I usually mark these, and these are little books, so they all right. Now this is in Galatians chapter 5, verse 22 and 23. But the fruit of the Spirit, or the Ruach, is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Against such there is no law. Okay, when you look at what it describes the Father's attributes throughout Scripture, that he is love, that he is long-suffering, that he is kind, that he's merciful, that he is just. So these attributes are his ways. And they're the ways that he wants us to act. The way he wants, this is, if you are walking in the Spirit. Because here it goes on in verse 24 through 26. It says, and they that are in Hamashiach have crucified the flesh with the afflictions and lusts. If we live in the Ruach, let us also walk in the Ruach. Let us not be desirous of vainglory, provoking one another, envying one another. Okay, so he's telling us walk in the Ruach. If we're walking in the Ruach, and we have these attributes that are the attributes of our Father, that is walking in his ways. And of course, part of that is also keeping his commands or his commandments. And I personally, this is just what I've come to believe to be true, that is a hallmark of walking in the way and being on the straight and narrow path that separates people from all these other Christian, denominational Protestants or whatever, is the Sabbath. Keeping the Sabbath. Because think about it. When Yahushua in Matthew 7 and 13, go back here to Matthew 7:13. Matthew 7 and verse 13. Enter ye at the strait gate, for wide is the gate, and broad is the way that leadeth to destruction, and many there be which go in thereat. Because strait is the gate, and narrow is the way which leadeth unto life, and few there be that find it. I believe that Sunday worship is the broad path, the broad gate that leads to destruction. Because if you look, with the exception of a few little sects or whatever of Christianity, they all worship on Sunday, the day of Hasatan, the day of the sun god. Okay, and he tells us in the Old Testament, the Tanakh, that the Sabbath is his sign upon those who are his sign to us, his seal upon us is that we keep his Sabbath. And you got these people, oh, well, that's the law, we're not under that anymore, but you got to remember that it was given, that command to keep the Sabbath was given before there was ever an Abraham, a Moses, or anybody else. It was given on the seventh day of creation. And it has never changed, and he never changes. He is Yahuwah, and he changes not. So he never changes. And the early Christians, they were called of the way. It wasn't until much later on that they began to call them Christians. They were called of the way. What way is he talking about? He's talking about Yahushua, HaMashiach. He is the way. Okay, and what did he do? Well, we know here in John, the Gospel of John, chapter 14, verse 6, Yahushua saith unto him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me. If ye had known me, you should have known my Father also, and from henceforth you know him and have seen him. Because again, as I've said in the past, the Father was in him. He was in the Father. He is in us, and we are in him. And if we are in him, then we are in the Father. I mean, it's just that simple. We are a part of Elohim. Just like Yahushua is a part of Elohim. And Yahuwah is a part of Elohim. And the Ruach HaKodesh is a part of Elohim. And that is the way. And the reason it's a narrow path, the straight gate and the narrow path. People say, oh, it's hard, man. Well, no, it's not hard. It's hard because we don't yield ourselves over to him. When we submit ourselves to him, then he will direct our paths. It says, lean not unto your own understanding, but in all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. You can't do it on your own. None of us can. He does it. He who has begun a good work in you is faithful and just to finish it and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. He does it. And he does it by the renewing of our minds. I've talked about this ad nauseum, that we have a flaw in our reasoning. In our programming, we've been programmed. We're programmed, and it's stored in our nefesh, our souls, is a repository of our living experience. Everything we ever experience and taste, touch, smell, feel, hear, see, think about, whatever, is all stored there. It's our living experience. It's what shapes us into the adults that we become. And even after. And so that living experience has been programmed. You know, the knowledge and the information has been programmed by the external world around us. By our teachers, by our parents, by our, uncles and aunts and cousins and friends and, books and movies and all of that stuff works on programming us. And then all that stuff is getting stored in our nefesh, and it becomes a part of our living experience. And so what the work he does is, through Yahushua and the Ruach, he begins the process of reprogramming us and fixing our reasoning. That's what walking in the way is. We walk in the way, and as we're walking in the way, we're being corrected. Our way of thinking is being corrected. And I'll show you where he, and here in 1 John, this is, I'm going to read here too. 1 John is one little chapter epistle, and verse 6. And this is love, that we walk after his commandments. That as ye have heard from the beginning, ye should walk in it. From the beginning. I mean, this is, and some people say, well, from the beginning of Yahushua's ministry, or, no, from the beginning. And I've talked about this before, people say, well, there wasn't no commandments before Moses. There wasn't none of that, no law given. Well, yeah, there was. I mean, Adam was. And, it talks about Noah, and he walked in the ways of Elohim. And Enoch, he walked with Elohim, and he walked in his ways. Well, how did he know what his ways was? He had to be taught, didn't he? Somebody had to teach him. And I'm sure Adam understood this too. That he understood that Elohim's kingdom was a kingdom of laws and statutes. I mean, if so as above, so below. If you look at the kingdoms of men and the kingdom of the Hebrews, it was modeled and based after the temple too. All of that was a earthly model, modeled after what was up above in the Shamayim. And so we have to understand that going all the way back to the beginning, I mean, that these things were, that they knew these things, they were taught these things. Elohim would not put, man here, Adam, and say, okay, don't eat that tree. Without telling him, I mean, what do you think he was doing walking with him during the day, walking in the garden? He was talking to him and telling him about how his ways were. And how to live rightly and to be prosperous and live in peace and happiness and joy and all these attributes of Elohim. And of course, he passed it down to, eventually he passed it down to his children when he, after his fall, and they began to procreate. And that's how Noah knew. It was passed down from generation to generation. Excuse me there. have a little Snapple apple. And so when you get back here, I'm going to go back here to Deuteronomy. This is Deuteronomy chapter 10, verses 12 and 13. And now, Israel, what doth Yahweh thy Elohim require of thee, but to fear Yahweh thy Elohim, to walk in all his ways, and to love him, and to serve Yahweh thy Elohim with all thy heart and with all thy soul. You have to have absolute obedience and be an absolutely faithful servant to him. And, that's what he requires of us. And to walk in his ways. And, of course, the scriptures lays out what his ways are. It's like, people, we don't have to eat the dietary laws, and they quote, chapter 10 of Acts, when I think it's chapter 10, when the sheets come down and Peter's, I've never eaten nothing unclean, and people think that means that it's okay to eat, unclean things. But it's not. That was a type, or a type of humans, unclean humans, and the Romans. And so it wasn't saying, oh, you can go out here and eat pork and and shellfish and frogs and bats and all this kind of stuff. No. And I mean, he lays it out, because and it's coming to light now. You got all these people that are against, the vegans and or vegans or whatever they call themselves, that want to do away with eating meat. And even these, elitists, while they sit back and eat big juicy steaks, they don't want you doing it. They want you to eat the bugs. But the scriptures, because he knows what this flesh and blood body needs to sustain it. And it needs meat. And I mean, you can look through, when you look at them doing the same, do you think they sacrificed all these animals there at the temple? And then what do they do? Just burn them up? No, they ate them. They cooked them and they eat them. They were commanded to do it. And they were healthy. I mean, when you look back, unless they started going off the deep end and, they didn't have issues, as long as they were doing what was right, they didn't have issues with demons and stuff like that messing with them. They didn't have issues with their health. They lived to ripe old ages. Look at how long, like Abraham lived. And he was a shepherd. And when you look at, when they were in Egypt, the Egyptians, loathed shepherds, people that raised animals. So whenever they went in there, Jacob and his family went in. They went into the land of Goshen because it was it was good grazing land. But it was far away. It was far away from the main Egypt, there. And so, they didn't want them right around them, but they give them prime land there to raise them. And of course, I don't know whether the Egyptians were, vegetarians or what they did, but the Hebrew people, they were shepherds. That's why there's so many metaphors about sheep and stuff, is because they were, they raised cattle, they raised sheep, they raised goats, ox. I mean, they raised all these animals, and those are all ruminant animals that are, that we can freely eat. And they're finding out now through these studies. As a matter of fact, I think like Harvard or somebody, can't get more woke than Harvard, but they even put out a study about the carnivore diet, And that, and now they've even come out with a new food pyramid that is totally the opposite of what they had been telling us. Before this big pyramid, food pyramid, at the bottom was grains and legume, stuff like that, carbs. And at the very top was fats and meats. Now it's flipped. The bottom is meats and fats and grains and carbs at the very peak. Because we have become the most unhealthy nation in the world. And yet we spend more than the rest of the world combined on health care. And, but our healthcare system doesn't involve nutrition. And, you'll get doctors that'll say, well, you need to exercise, you need to put, but their diets, that they recommend are totally contrary to what we should be eating. And they're and it ain't just anecdotal, this is studies and stuff that have been done. And Dr. Ken Berry, Dr. Berg, and others that are big on carnivore and ketogenic diets. Dr. Ken Berry, he's been following and tracking this stuff for a long time. And the benefits of it, people reversing diabetes, reversing heart disease, reversing, these chronic illnesses, just by going on a carnivore diet, quitting the carbs and stuff. Because whenever they put that food pyramid out, I think it was back in the late 70s or 80s or some early 80s or somewhere along there, and it was all these carbs. Well, what do you think drove that? Because they knew back then that carbs were bad for you. They knew it. But they pushed this stuff because it helped the pharmaco-medical industry and big agriculture. That's why they pushed it on us. Even though right here, if you want to be healthy and you want to have a strong heart and work. If you do a kind of work that is sedentary, then you need to be doing something to move around, get some exercise, walk, ride a bike. I got a friend of mine give me a bicycle, but it's got a little bit of a bent rim on it, and there's a guy up there in town that works on bikes. I'm gonna take it up there and let him get it tuned up and running good. It's a mountain bike. And I got another bike there that I got on consignment that I'm selling for a friend of mine that's really a better size. It's a 29-inch bike, but it's a road bike. And I want something I can rail. They got what they call the rail trail, where they tuck up the railroad tracks here, but it's a good riding trail. And so I was thinking, and it comes all the way down here, from here to Gasaway. Actually, it goes from Gasaway all the way to Charleston. And if you want to ride it that far, but I'm gonna have to kind of. I rode it out there around the parking lot. I had to put it back together. The wheels was off of it, and the seat and all that stuff. So I put everything back together, and got the derailleur lined up correctly and stuff. And so I rode it around a little bit out there, and man, I could tell my calves and all were kind of groaning. So I'm gonna have to just start just riding down the road a little bit and back, and kind of just do that 2 or 3 times a day until I get used to it before I try riding it from Gasaway to here or from here to Gasaway. Because I need to get the exercise. I get some doing, but being in the store, that's kind of sedentary. Per se, you just kind of standing there. I do, I have to mop and sweep and stuff like that, but that's not that much, especially, I was used to always doing, hard physical work, and I was always pretty fit, but, not quite as fit now. But if you're doing, but if you do physical labor, you still maybe need to do, a variety of stuff, that kind of exercises your whole body and all that, and get plenty of sleep and stuff like that. But and that's his way. I mean, when you look at Abraham there, whenever it says the Lord's basically came up, and what did he do? He goes and kills a calf, or a fatted calf, and prepares it and gives it to his wife to cook, and he gives them milk to drink. I mean, so they and Yahushua, I mean, of course, he eat a lot of fish and stuff because they were, kind of destitute, really. I mean, he could have made, had whatever he wanted, but they did eat meat. He did, because whenever they would have these feasts, the feast of Yahweh, Deuteronomy Deuteronomy chapter 11, 13, somewhere along in there, where it lays out the feast, or Deuteronomy 23. It lays out the feast, and they cook all these animals and stuff. And they would be hundreds of thousands of people down there when they had these feasts. And there'd be a lot of cooking going on. I mean, they would sacrifice these animals. People would offer up, like at atonement and stuff like that. They would offer up their lamb without blemish, and then once it was, slaughtered, and the blood drained and all that stuff, then they dressed it out and they eat it. And they were required to eat it. And it was for their health. It had more than one implication to it. It wasn't just about atoning for their sin. It was about their, eating this healthy food. And of course, like I say, it's more and more and more studies and stuff that they're coming out with, and more, and not just studies, but actual proof of people that were in really bad shape that began to eat these carcinogenic, and losing like 100 pounds, and, getting rid of visceral fat, and, all their markers, their A1C and all that kind of stuff, is just vastly improved. And so, of course, I know it's expensive, but, and that's because there's an attack against it. Why? Because they don't want us walking in the ways of Elohim. They don't want us doing what is right. But, you can get plenty of pork. There's plenty of that, and it's cheap. There's no attack on pork, just on beef and poultry. And poultry, eggs, it's a superfood. I mean, man, I eat like a half a dozen of them at a time. And, I cook them different ways so I don't get quite burnt out on them, and we get fresh eggs, thankfully, but because they're starting to adulterate them, they're releasing, they killed all these healthy birds with nothing wrong with them because of avian flu. Killed them all off, hundreds of millions of them. Egg-laying birds, and not just the chicken, but it's funny. No other birds has got this. And I mean, I've seen, with chickens and all out there, I mean, you'll see robins and, sparrows and all out there, right there with them eating, birds flock together, the old saying. And so, but yet they don't get nothing. Only what is good for us. Chickens and beef. Now they're saying, it's going to jump to beef. And then you see people like this Bill Gates. I mean, this guy is the face of pure evil. I mean, everything that guy wants, and it's not just him. It's all of these elitists. And that's why, I believe these people are Nephilim or either demon possessed. They're one of the two. And they're the same ones that, they're like Bill Gates, they're the face of these people that we don't see. The controllers, the ones behind the scenes, that shall not be, that we're not supposed to mention. They're people like Bill Gates, George Soros, Klaus Schwab, and he had to resign from the WEF, but they talk like the guy that's replacing him is even worse than he is. You know, I mean, they're not giving up and on what their agenda is. This, you know, eat the bugs, basically. You know, and they're trying to educate. You know, get it into schools and teach kids this stuff. That's why it is so important for you to teach your own kids about walking in the ways of Elohim. Don't let the school system, you know, and you got to do it early. I mean, mothers, if you are with child, you talk to them through the womb. You know, they can hear you through the womb. And so you can start by quoting scriptures to them and singing hymns and stuff like that. And it will work on programming. You start programming them before they're born. And then after. And once you get that programmed into them, it's going to be hard for the system to take it out of them. Thank Elohim. Train up a child in the way it should go. When they're older, will not depart from it. And I'm a prime example. You know, I drifted off, but it says when you're old, you will not depart from it. In other words, when you're, older, it'll come back to you. Because most young people, not all, but most young people, when they get to be teenagers and young adults, they're going to want to go their own way. They have to learn. They have to learn the hard way a lot of times. I mean, you can learn the easy way. Listen to mom and dad and grandpa and grandma, when they teach you to walk right. But like most of us, I can say for sure about me. I mean, and the chastisement wasn't nice. I mean, but now that I'm older, I've come back and to it. I've come back to it and no turning back. And so, he lays it out over and over again about walking in his ways. He tells his people, and I'm not just talking about Israel. I'm talking about anybody who follows in his ways. Like here in Joshua chapter 22 and verse 5. But take diligent heed to do the commandment and the law which Moses, the servant of Yahweh, charged you, to love Yahweh your Elohim, and to walk in all his ways, and to keep his commandments, and to cleave unto him, and to serve him with all your heart and with all your soul. And and of course we're all going to come short. We're as long as we're in this flesh, we're going to have moments of lapse. We're going to lapse, and I think that when it comes to the like stealing and killing and lying and stuff, that's usually we can overcome that stuff. But it's more the personal interactions with people that tend to, get angry or say the wrong thing, say something hurtful to somebody. That's the part that's the hard part to overcome. They're like quitting bad habits, smoking, drinking, stuff like that. Yeah, it can be hard too, but most of the time, those things we can, ultimately overcome them. But it's those emotional related issues and things that's the real thing to overcome. And of course, in order to be walking truly in his ways, because he is love, he is, mercy, he's long suffering, he's just. And we have to be the same. And we have to, like Paul was talking about there in Galatians, kindness and gentleness. I mean, these things are, really important. And the Father finds that, he's gentle. But he can also be, he says he's a jealous Elohim, because, he's jealous over those who are his. And he ain't going to, and he's jealous over his glory. He's not going to share it with anyone. I mean, after all, he is omnipotent. There is none over him. There's none above him. So, I mean, and he is due, he even tells us, like there in Romans, he tells us to give honor to those who honor is due, to give glory to him because it is due to him, because of who he is. And he demonstrates, he says he demonstrated his love toward us in that he gave his own son as a ransom for us. I mean, what greater love can you have? And that's an action, folks. That's, love is an action word. It means to do. It means to, it's your actions that determine your love, whether you love or not. It's not, you can say I love you all day long, but that doesn't mean you do. It's what you do that demonstrates your love, or not. And then Job. You look here in this is Samuel. Let me look here in Samuel. Samuel chapter 12, verse 23. Moreover, as for me, Elohim forbid that I should sin against Yahweh in ceasing to pray for you, but I will teach you the good and the right way. I mean, and this is all throughout, this is the theme all throughout Scripture about the way. The ways of Elohim. The ways of his kingdom. And how it operates and how it's able to go on to infinity. Forever. Because of that. If it was, ruled the way that we rule, it would have been destroyed a long time ago. I mean, why do you think, all through all these different periods of peakness for men, that they basically were coming to destruction? Except that the Father intervened, there wouldn't be no human beings. We'd have been destroyed a long time ago. That's why you have these resets. But it's also, like the one we're in now, and I do believe we're in the little season. And the scriptures, I forgot what the scripture was, but there is a scripture, and it may be in Deuteronomy, where it says that generationally we forget the past. We're prone to forget. That's why everybody records everything and writes everything down. Because after several generations, I mean, even like now, you ask somebody this in the latest generation, what is it, Generation Z or whatever, you ask them about World War II and stuff like that, and they can't, unless they're history buffs or something and study it or whatever, they can't tell you nothing about World War II. I mean, they can't even really tell you nothing about Vietnam. Other than what, somebody tells them or whatever, but as far as they have no real memory of it. And in another generation or two, it'd be completely forgotten. If it wasn't wrote down or in film or, recorded in some way, 100 years from now, nobody would know what World War II, World War I, Korea, Vietnam, Napoleon, none of that stuff. Civil War, it would all be forgotten. Unless, you had people that had, like the Native Americans, oral storytelling or whatever, but even that over time can get embellished, to where it's no longer exactly the way it really was or whatever. Let's see. And then here in Kings, and some of these verses, they repeat it. They repeat a lot of this stuff. And it's because that's how we learn, by rote. I mean, just by doing it and hearing it and seeing it over and over and over again. This is 1 Kings. This same verse is in 1 Kings and in 2 Chronicles. And it's 1 Kings 8, 35 and 36. When heaven is shut up and there is no rain because they have sinned against thee, if they pray toward this place and confess thy name and turn from their sin, when thou afflictest them, then hear thou in heaven and forgive the sin of thy servants and of thy people Israel, that thou teach them the good way wherein they should walk, and give rain upon thy land, which thou hast given to thy people for an inheritance. And then it's the same over here in 2 Chronicles, exact same, word for word. 2 Chronicles 6, 26 and 27. When the heaven is shut up and there is no rain because they have sinned against thee, yet if they pray towards this place and confess thy name and turn from their sin when thou dost afflict them, then hear thou from heaven and forgive the sin of thy servants and of thy people Israel, when thou hast taught them the good way wherein they should walk, and send rain upon thy land which thou hast given unto thy people for an inheritance. Same thing. And if you look here, and this is, he says, if my people, and of course, at that time it was directed at Israel, but in the overall scheme of it all, it applies to any who are following in his ways. If you slip and fall, if you, if you confess your sin and you turn from it, then he'll hear you and he'll forgive you, and he will continue to lead you and teach you in his ways. It says, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek, turn from their wickedness and seek my face, then I will hear from heaven and I will forgive their sin and heal their land. And that applies to us today. I mean, these are truisms. They're things that never change. They remain the same no matter what time in history you are in. It still applies, his ways. And, and he says, if you regard iniquity in your heart, he will not hear you. You have to first confess your sin and turn from it. Repent of it. Then he'll hear you. But if you still, if you're living in sin or you regarding some kind of iniquity in your heart, and he's the one that can see the intentions and the thoughts of your heart. I mean, you can't you can't like hide it. You can hide it from me, you can hide it from other people, but you can't hide it from him. And really, you can't hide it from yourself. But people will try, they'll try to shove it down in the back of their memories, in the back of their mind and forget about it. But it's still there, it's still in our nefesh, it's still in our living experience, and you're not going to get rid of it. And he knows it. He can look inside of our souls in our living experience. And that's the reason when you go before judgment, you ain't going to be able to, say, oh, I didn't do that, because it's recorded right there. But not only is that recorded there, but your intentions. Because it records everything. Because, your intentions are in your thoughts. And everything that's in your thoughts gets recorded and gets stored. So he knows the intentions of your heart. It's because, and that's, kind of one of the things that's going to be one of the, parts of the judgment is that he's going to look at what your intentions were. Did you intend to do wicked? Did you intend to hurt somebody? Was that your intent, or was it accidental? Or ignorant? And you're going to be weighed in the balance. Let's see. Now, this is in Job. And Job, of course, is believed is older than the scriptures. It was, some even believe it may have been pre-flood. I don't know. Again, how can we really know anything about the past? Honestly. Again, if it wasn't for what's been written down by men, we wouldn't know anything about the past. And of course, the old saying is that the victors write the history. So they write the history that they, whoever is the big dog, whoever is the power, they write the history, and they write it the way they want it to read. They don't, they're not going to put anything in there that's going to reflect negatively on them. They're not going to tell you that they were, bloodthirsty tyrant or, a psychopath or something like that. No, they're going to tell you he was a conquering hero, And that's just the way history is. And that's why it's really hard to know for sure what is true and what isn't. But in Job 23, chapter 10, or verse 10, 23, here it is, 10. But he knoweth the way that I take. When he hath tried me, I shall come forth as gold. My foot hath held his steps. His way have I kept and not declined. That's why it says his word is a lamp unto our feet, so that we can see to walk in the ways of Elohim. His word. And of course, prayer, and seeking the guidance of the Ruach to lead us to the truth of what he's saying. Let's see. Here in Proverbs, and of course this is, and this is a recurring theme when it comes to this as well. This is in Proverbs 14. $14:12. There is a way which seemeth right unto a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death, destruction. Proverbs 15:10. Correction is grievous unto him that forsaketh the way, and he that hateth reproof shall die. And when it's talking about dying, it ain't talking about this physical body. It's talking about the destruction of who you are. The destruction of your soul, your living experience, who you are. You cease to exist. Eternal life, eternal death. No gray area. And that's the problem with religion. They like to have their little gray areas. And it's, you know, what is it? Is it Zechariah chapter 5? Or it might be Ezekiel. Anyway, it says the soul that sinneth shall surely die. That's that, you know. The goal for us is, you know, the prize at the end of the journey is eternal life. But it's only possible if we walk in the ways of Elohim. And it's a narrow, you know, path when you look at the greater scope thing, because the world is the manifestation of our own creation. We create it. We create the reality of the world that we are in. I've talked about that, you know, about what we believe. What we believe is what we manifest. What we truly believe is what gets manifested into the world. And, you know, and you get these, you know, the Germans have a name for this phenomenon that occurs in a cycle, and it's called the Zeitgeist, which is interpreted into English, it means spirit of the age. That these cycles where you get this collective manifestation, that people get caught up in this spirit, you know, like they did under Nazism, you know, Hitler. And I mean, you see that, you know, you see this old film footage of hundreds of thousands of people standing out there, you know, doing the Hitler salute or whatever, and shouting, you know. I mean, they're all caught up in it. This spirit of the age. And it begins to, you know, what these people, this little group, you know, led by Hitler and all of his henchmen, they begin to push it out there. This belief, they pushed it out there, and it began to take a hold of these people, and then they began to believe it, and then they began to manifest this vision that Hitler had for them of dominance, of dominating the world, you know, and it manifested. It manifested into a world war, and that's you know, and that was the collective belief. They had this belief that they had, and they used, you know, they used sorcery. They used. And I'm talking about sorcery in the sense of pharmakia. They used chemicals in the water. They used you know, they gave people stuff, like all the soldiers carried methamphetamine or methadone around with them. And, you know, they could march for a week, man, without eating or anything else after taking that stuff. And, you know, and so they also bewitched people, you know, or cast spells. They spell casting. And so they would, you know, when they would make these speeches and all that stuff, they would make all these gestures. They'd have all this symbolism around them and all this stuff. And that's what that is. It's like the Oscars and the Emmy Awards. That's all spell casting, folks. That's why you shouldn't watch that stuff. And you watch them people, they're performing rituals up there. And it's getting more, you know, used to it was more low key and not so in your face. Now it's blatant. I mean, it's blatantly obvious that that's what they're doing. And if you're watching it, then they're trying to cast a spell on you. And so, you know, any of that kind of stuff, it's, you know, I don't care what it's country music awards. I mean, anything, because that's all part of the agenda of Hasatan. Whenever, you know, he done his planning, that's all part of it. That's all part of programming, because he understands, you know, about programming and brainwashing and all that stuff. That stuff's, you know, that's been around forever. And, you know, they use stuff like that to beguile people to brainwash them, to program them, and to put these symbols into your mind, burn these symbols into your mind, these rituals that they're doing. And a lot of times they get people caught up in it, like at concerts, rock concerts or music concerts, rap or whatever. And they're doing this stuff and they're getting the people in the audience involved in it. And they're spell casting against believers, people like us. They're using that spirit of the age kind of thing, that Zeitgeist, to direct, to call up demons, to come after people, to attack you, to attack believers, people of the way. And witches, these people at certain times, when they supposedly have greater, like Halloween, the solstices, the equinoxes and stuff, they use these times to do this stuff, on another level. And it is to attack believers. And or they also take people, and this is stuff that's highly documented about where they take kids and stuff, it's called satanic ritual abuse. But they ritually abuse these kids, and they basically destroy their identity of themselves, and then they reprogram them, and they make them into sleepers. At any time they could, call them up and trigger them in some way, and they go into, like these school shootings and stuff like that. That's what that is. And in fact, when you look in, what is it, MK Ultra and Project Monarch or whatever, that's what that is. It's government sanctioned, government funded research and programs to do that, to brainwash people, to get to destroy their identities, their self identity, and to put a different one in them. And they still both exist there, but the new one becomes more dominant. And so they can just, say a trigger word or whatever and bring up that new identity, almost like schizophrenia or whatever, or, demonic possession. And that's what they do. And then they got these people around, and they can just call them up and say a certain, phrase or something, and boom, it snaps. And that suppressed, identity that they have in there pops up, and and it's got whatever they programmed into them to do whenever that's triggered. Like I say, go out, commit a mass shooting or whatever, or just target individuals, target Christians or whatever, or believers. And so and they want to do stuff to take and push you off of the way. And it's like I said, I think in previous video, that we're on this straight and narrow path between two abysses. There's an abyss over here and an abyss over here, and they're trying to knock you off into one of them abysses. With whatever method that they have to use. And as time goes by, it escalates. It keeps ramping up, to where, and it's not only that, but, because they've got total control of the educational system, and they've so twisted it and perverted it, again, that's why it's so important for you to teach your children at home, as far as, their beliefs and stuff, and really ingrain it in them, and if possible, to homeschool I mean, I just was watching about this Ketanji Brown Jackson, this Supreme Court justice, and she was commenting about all this LGBTQ and transgender stuff that they're putting into schools, these books and stuff. And, a lot of states, and there's a lot of, legal stuff going back and forth because a lot of states is trying to remove that stuff out of their schools, for kids, up to like in the 5th grade or something like that. I think they ought to remove it all in all schools. But, that's not going to happen. But, especially for young, impressionable children, and these transgender people, transvestites or whatever, going into the schools all dressed up, just unreal. I mean, that anybody, thinks that's okay. But, but it's all designed to divert you off of the way. And I think one of the biggest ones is Protestant Christianity and Catholicism. That's they adamantly, even if you show them that it never changed, there's nowhere in Scripture that says that the Sabbath changed. They still insist on doing this Sunday stuff. So, that to me is, Sunday worship is the broad gate, the broad path. And so many people deceived. And as I've said before, this right here, because if you look at when Yahushua was here, what did he do? He attacked the religious establishment. He didn't attack Rome and them. They were the nations. They were pagans. I mean, they had been given over to what they were, and so he did not focus on them. He focused on the people that were supposed to be representing Yahuwah Elohim, and they had completely missed the mark. In fact, they had missed it so much that they had become like a harlot. And they were teaching the traditions and doctrines of men and not teaching the commandments, not teaching the ways of Elohim. And it become a religion rather than a way of life, a way of living. Because if you look at there in Deuteronomy, and when it talks about, and in Leviticus, it was a way of life. They done these things over and over and over again. These festivals, the feasts and stuff. It was a yearly thing, and the Sabbath. It was all meant to be a way of life, not a religion. This is not a religion. It's a way of life. It's a way of living. It's a way of Elohim. And it has nothing to do with religion. Religion is a man-made construct. That's why he was after them so hard. Because it was something that they had created. And they had took what Elohim had given them and perverted it. And it's the same with these religions. They've all perverted it. When you hear of the stuff that these churches are allowing, the homosexual stuff, same-sex marriage, on and on and on and on. Abortion, all that stuff. And yet, and I call them out. And it's not judging somebody. The scriptures is clear. If you see that somebody's doing it, doing something that is not right, that's contrary to the ways of Elohim, and they're claiming they are, well, then you got to steer them back onto the right, back onto the narrow path. And if they won't receive it, you take them in front of the elders, and if they still won't, then you take them in front of the congregation and you extricate them. I mean, that's the prescribed method for dealing with it. Because if you don't, it'll spread. I mean, you can't tolerate evil. You can't give it quarter. And, and you just, it's like, I mean, I work in the store down here and all that, and these people come in and they use, they're not believers. They're not walking in the way. I don't judge them. But by the same token, I don't, hang out with them either. I mean, they know where I stand. And I will try to talk to them about it. But, especially if I feel led. Because, I mean, if I don't feel led to tell somebody, I mean, why would I? Because they're not going to receive it. It's just going to go in one ear and right out the other ear. People have to be drawn by Yahuwah. Except, Christ said, except the Father draw you. You can't come to Christ. You can't come to Yahushua. You can't. He's the one that does it all, not me. All I can do, is to try to bring you the word. And it says, belief cometh by hearing, and hearing by the word of Elohim. So I bring this word to you, and hopefully it will begin to strengthen your belief. And then, you can begin to call on him. I mean, because you got to believe that he is before you can call him. You can't call on something you don't believe in. And of course that, is faith building. I mean, belief, and so I just, if somebody, I feel led that somebody needs to hear something, then, about the truth. Because a lot of times, I mean, these people, they already know. I mean, they've been to church and all, and they've heard, come down and say your little prayer, the sinner's prayer or whatever. And that kind of thing. And then, pat you on the back, everybody shake your hand. And then, next week you go into baptismal and we dunk you in the water and you're good to go. And I try to correct that. Yeah, I mean, that is, but unless the Father, you can't go down there, just because you feel guilty you done something, and, well, I'm going to go down here and get saved. Because it's not going to last. It's not going to be sustainable because it doesn't come from him. He's the one that has to do it. And he does it by troubling your conscience. He sends the Ruach to trouble your conscience. Then you begin to, call on him and, confess. You start confessing your sin and you start repenting of it. And the true proof in the pudding as to whether you really are converted or not is that you turn away from sin. You turn away from doing this stuff. That's what repentance means. It means to turn away. To walk on the straight and narrow path in the ways of Elohim. And let's see, I think I got one more scripture here in Isaiah. I think it might be Isaiah. Or no, it's Micah. Chapter 6, verse 8. He hath showed thee, O man, what is good, and what doth Yahuwah require of thee, but to do justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy Elohim. And that's another thing that we have to learn as, as humility. And Yahushua, he really emphasized this to his disciples when they were debating about who was going to be the greatest. And he said, let whoever would be your master be your servant, and who would be your teacher, to be subservient. Because, we learn wisdom through humility. I mean, that's how we gain wisdom, is by being humble. And being humble before Him. I mean, beginning of wisdom, fear of Yahuwah. Fear of Yahweh is the beginning of wisdom. And in order to fear, first you got to humble yourself. You got to be humble. If you're haughty, then you don't fear Him. And you're not going to, there's no wisdom in that. That's about as foolish as you can get. And that, and that's why you see, I mean, these people just do all the things they do because they truly do not, they don't believe. They just really don't believe in Him. Because if you did, you would fear Him. And so I believe that one of the true signs of somebody who is dedicated to walking in the ways of Elohim and on the straight and narrow path is by keeping the Sabbath and keeping His commandments. And the way you do that, I mean, I've talked about that too ad nauseum, is the law of love. Loving the Father with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and loving your neighbor as yourself. And this is all of the law and the prophets. But you can't really emphasize this stuff enough, because a lot of people don't, they just still can't get it. They think that they can go on doing whatever they want to do. Oh, well, I went down there and, confessed my sin and said a little prayer and, and I got sprinkled, or I got dipped in the baptismal over here, and I'm good. But they go right back out and they're doing everything that they were doing before. And that's unacceptable. You can't. If you're truly converted, you should see it in the change in the way that you live. You should be walking in the ways of Elohim. And that's just all there is to it. And you can't be on the straight and narrow path unless you are walking in His ways. And Yahushua, He was the living example of how to do it. He fulfilled it. He fulfilled the law and all of the statutes. He done it all without error. And so if you want to know how you do it, read the Gospels, because He's going to tell you. And of course, I've talked about, the epistles of John is important to read, because it tells you that, how do you know that you love Elohim? Because you keep His commandments. In other words, you walk in His ways. If you really love the Father, you show your love. Again, it's action, folks. If you love Him, it's going to be reflected in your actions. Are you walking in His ways? And it's, real obvious. I mean, when you look at the life of Yahushua, He set the example. And if you're following His example, then you're walking in the ways of Elohim. That's all there is to it. Doesn't get any, it's not that hard to understand. But you can't, say that you are converted and continue to live in sin. Blatant. You've got to have a change. I mean, that's how you know. How do you know that you're saved? Because there should be a marked change in your life. I mean, the old man or woman should be gone or on its way out. And a new man, new woman on its way in. And that's how you know. And so I hope that has been edifying for you and beneficial for you. I want people to understand that that's what's required of us. And that's why the road in the way is narrow, because and it's not hard. It's not, people like to make it out to be as, that it's so hard. Well, it's not. The way of the transgressor is hard. I mean, look at, if you're sexually promiscuous, you get disease, have unwanted children, you break the law, you go to jail, you do drugs and smoke and drink, you wind up with bad health. I mean, you think that's, but the devil makes it all look like it's, that's where you want to be, man, come on and join us, and party hardy. Do whatever you want, And see, my way, you can just do whatever you want. But it leads to death. And a lot of times, in this life, I mean, it's hard. I mean, people look at these people with all the money and all that stuff, the big multi-billionaires and all that stuff, and a lot of them people are miserable, man. And a lot of them have given their souls over. I mean, basically given themselves completely over to Hasatan to be in that position. And then they realize later on what they've done. And they can't get out. I mean, I seen like an interview or something with that Eminem or whatever, and he was saying that he is troubled by demons all the time. All the time. Do you think that's all cool and good? No, it ain't. And it's the same with, that's why I don't want to listen to none of that stuff. I don't listen to it. Because most of it is, it's got same thing. I mean, it's spell casting. And because a lot of these, I believe that and I've seen it, from time to time, like these musicians, singers and stuff up there. I mean, they totally different person. Totally different. They're took over. There's one of these, demonic entities or whatever that's doing it through them. Muses or whatever. That's doing it, writing these songs. And these songs are rituals. Rituals or spell casting. And they tell, they're doing it, sex is, great, or drugs are great, or, this is great, or whatever. And they're casting spells with that. And then it goes into these people, they get it into their minds, and they start going out and doing this stuff. That's the whole thing. And I mean, these demonic entities and all, they know exactly what they're doing. But the people that they're taking over, they don't. They don't realize what they're doing. They're blind. They don't realize the consequences of it, which is the destruction of their soul. And coming back from that is, the further down, it's not that you can't, that people like that can't be redeemed and converted. They can. You hear about it, instances of it, but it becomes harder and harder the deeper in that they get. And then one day they just cut off. And that's the way Satan does, man. He wants to hold on to you till your name's taken out of the book of the living. And then he say, well, there's another one that I destroyed. But anyway, I thank all you folks that watched the videos. I thank you for the responses on the yogurt videos. The little one where I showed up, I got the most views on that I've ever gotten. I guess it's because I said the least. But anyway, I love you folks. I pray that all of you will be blessed, that you will have a great coming up week, and that everything will go good for you. And as for me, I think I'm going to try to put a video on here. I think I said something about it before, but I've been working on the shop up there. I put in all new lighting, and I've been spring cleaning, organizing stuff. I got together a whole bunch of clothes up there, and this thrift store up in Clarksburg, they were looking for donations. They said they had a real need for clothes and stuff, and I had like 30 or 40 totes, boxes, bags of clothes. And I spent 2 weeks going through all them clothes, and I got, like the best name brands and stuff, but it was all good clothes. No ratty clothes or nothing like that. Anything ratty, I throw it in a bag for grease rags for my woman's son. And so I got them together like 16 or 18 bags of clothes, and they come by and picked them up, which would help me out, because I've got like 12 racks of clothes plus another 20 totes and boxes full of clothes. Just more clothes than, I'll be dead and gone and there'll still be clothes there. But anyway, and it helped me out to get it out of there, so I got room, because that place is, it's not a lot of room. It's a pretty good sized place. And so I'm going to do a video once I get everything nice and polished up. Do a little video and post it on here so y'all can see what it is I do. Part of what I do. I do a lot more than that, but that's just, part of it. But anyway, y'all, keep me in your prayers, and I'll be keeping y'all in my prayers. And I'll see you all again on the next Shabbat, if Yahweh is willing.